The Allied invasion of Normandy was a masterclass in military planning. But on one bloody stretch of sand, the entire operation teetered on the brink of catastrophic failure. From ignored intelligence to disastrous tactical miscalculations, a series of crucial choices transformed a difficult assault into an absolute slaughterhouse for American troops. Today, we are examining the 10 D-Day decisions that nearly handed Omaha Beach to Germany. The American command made a fateful choice when they largely rejected the specialized armored vehicles developed by the British, affectionately known as Hobart's Funnies. While British and Canadian forces utilized mine-clearing flail tanks, bridge layers, and armored bulldozers to rapidly overcome beach obstacles, the Americans at Omaha relied almost entirely on the amphibious duplex-drive Sherman tanks. Believing the specialized British armor was unnecessary or too difficult to integrate into their assault plans, American commanders left their infantry without crucial mechanical support. When the battle began, the sheer density of German obstacles, combined with a lack of armored engineering vehicles, meant that American troops were pinned down on the shingle, with no way to quickly breach the seawall. This lack of specialized armor directly contributed to the agonizingly slow progress and staggering casualty rates during the opening hours of the assault. Compounding the lack of specialized armor was the disastrous decision regarding how the few amphibious tanks they did have were deployed into the water. Despite rough seas and high winds, commanders ordered the duplex-drive Sherman tanks to be launched from their landing craft a staggering 3 miles off the coast. These tanks were equipped with canvas flotation screens designed for relatively calm waters, not the heavy swells of the English Channel that morning. As a result, the canvas screens were quickly overwhelmed by the waves, and 27 of the 29 tanks assigned to the first wave of the 111th Field Artillery Battalion sank straight to the bottom of the channel, taking many of their crews with them. This blunder stripped the leading infantry waves of nearly all their heavy fire support, just when they needed it most. In the months leading up to the invasion, Allied planners promised the assault troops that heavy bombers would obliterate the German defenses before the first boot touched the sand. However, the decision to use heavy bombers flying high above the clouds, combined with strict orders to delay dropping their payloads by a few seconds to avoid hitting the approaching landing craft, resulted in a spectacular failure. The massive aerial armada dropped thousands of tons of bombs, but virtually all of them fell miles inland, destroying French farmland and killing livestock, instead of shattering the concrete bunkers overlooking Omaha Beach. When the ramps of the landing craft finally dropped, the American soldiers were horrified to discover that the formidable German fortifications were completely intact and fully operational. To make matters worse, the pre-invasion naval bombardment was shockingly brief, lasting only about 40 minutes before the troops hit the beaches. Planners feared that a prolonged naval barrage would forfeit the element of surprise and give the German defenders time to rush reinforcements to the coast. However, 40 minutes of shelling from battleships and cruisers was nowhere near enough time to neutralize the heavily fortified pillboxes, artillery casemates, and machine gun nests woven into the bluffs of Omaha Beach. The brevity of the bombardment meant that many of the most dangerous German positions survived the initial onslaught completely unscathed. The surviving defenders simply emerged from their deep concrete bunkers, manned their weapons, and prepared to unleash a torrent of fire upon the exposed American infantry. The sheer distance from which the infantry landing craft were launched proved to be another critical error that severely degraded the fighting capacity of the American troops. Fearing the range of German coastal artillery, the Navy decided to anchor the troop transports 11 miles offshore, forcing the soldiers to endure a long, agonizing journey in small, flat-bottomed Higgins boats. The rough seas violently tossed the overcrowded craft for hours, causing rampant seasickness that left heavily burdened soldiers physically exhausted and severely dehydrated before the battle even began. Many boats were swamped by the freezing waves, forcing men to bail water frantically just to stay afloat. By the time these battered craft finally reached the shoreline, the troops inside were violently ill, freezing cold, and drained of the vital energy needed to sprint across the deadly expanse of the beach. The strategic decision to land at low tide was made to expose the massive network of German beach obstacles, allowing demolition teams to clear safe paths for the incoming landing craft. While this choice made sense on paper, the grim reality was that it forced the infantry to cross over 300 yards of completely open, coverless sand while under intense enemy fire. The wet, heavy sand slowed the heavily laden soldiers to a crawl, turning them into highly visible targets for the German machine gunners and snipers positioned on the towering bluffs above. The long, agonizing trudge across the exposed tidal flat became a horrific slaughter as men were cut down by crisscrossing fields of fire long before they could reach the meager protection of the shingle bank. One of the most catastrophic intelligence failures of the entire Normandy campaign occurred right at Omaha Beach, where Allied planners vastly underestimated the quality of the defending troops. Intelligence reports indicated that the area was defended by a low-tier coastal defense division composed of older men and conscripts who were expected to surrender quickly. Tragically, they failed to detect that the battle-hardened 352nd Infantry Division, a unit packed with combat veterans from the Eastern Front, had recently been moved into the sector to conduct anti-invasion exercises. These seasoned veterans possessed the discipline, marksmanship, and tactical ruthlessness required to maximize the defensive potential of the bluffs. The Americans expected a fragile defensive line, but instead, they crashed headfirst into a wall of elite, highly motivated soldiers who knew exactly how to utilize their overlapping fields of fire. The plan to bring field artillery ashore early in the battle relied heavily on the use of amphibious trucks known as ducks. But this decision quickly turned into a logistical nightmare. These awkward, heavily loaded vehicles were completely unsuited for the turbulent waters of the English Channel that morning. As they attempted to navigate the massive swells, the ducks were repeatedly swamped, sending crucial 105mm howitzers and thousands of rounds of ammunition straight to the bottom of the sea. The loss of this vital artillery meant that the infantry on the beach was deprived of the immediate, heavy-caliber fire support necessary to knock out the fortified German bunkers. Without their own artillery to counter the relentless German barrages, the pinned-down Americans were left to rely entirely on small arms and sheer courage to break the stalemate. In the chaos of the initial landings, commanders rigidly adhered to a strict invasion timetable, blindly sending wave after wave of troops and vehicles onto a beach that was already choked with dead and dying men. Because the initial assault elements had failed to clear the beach exits, the subsequent waves of landing craft had nowhere to go, creating massive traffic jams of men, tanks, and half-tracks along the water's edge. This constant funneling of reinforcements into a confined, heavily targeted kill zone provided the German artillery and mortar crews with a target-rich environment that they simply could not miss. The failure to halt or divert the incoming waves until the exits were secured resulted in a horrific bottleneck, multiplying the casualties and turning the shoreline into a chaotic graveyard of burning vehicles and shattered infantry. Perhaps the most fundamental decision that nearly doomed the operation was the selection of Omaha Beach as a landing site in the first place. Geographically, the beach was a defender's dream, featuring a crescent-shaped shoreline that naturally funneled attackers into concentrated kill zones, backed by steep bluffs rising up to 150 feet in the air. The only ways off the beach were 5 narrow ravines, known as draws, which the Germans had heavily fortified with concrete pillboxes, anti-tank ditches, and vast minefields. By choosing to assault this natural fortress head-on, Allied planners effectively handed the geographical high ground and every tactical advantage to the enemy. It was only through the unimaginable bravery, localized initiative, and sheer willpower of the common soldier, sailor, and junior officer that this daunting terrain was finally conquered. The sheer bravery of the men who fought through these disastrous conditions remains one of the greatest testaments to human courage in military history. Which of these decisions do you think was the most critical mistake made by the Allied commanders?